your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast with Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. This podcast, as usual, brought to you by our friends at Cantex Roofing and Construction.
I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
I bet they are a bit busy after this past weekend's worth of thunderstorm activity, hail activity, no electricity activity.
Yeah, I'd say so.
80 to 90 mile an hour wind activity. Jeez.
I would guess they've got quite a bit of business, and
Yeah.
hopefully gaining more with this podcast. Thanks for them teaming up here.
Yes.
Level, quite a bit has gone on. We took a little break between our weeks here, and
Labor Day weekend. Or
Yep.
no, excuse me, Memorial
Day weekend.
Yeah.
But since then,
I wish it was Labor Day weekend, because
that would
means
mean
football would be here.
You're right.
Yeah.
We are inside the 3-month window, though, so that's good. We got kickoff times. We got JT Toppin signing with Tech over that last week span, so quite a bit to get into, quite a few questions from the audience. So let's dive in. Kickoff times. We can start there real quick with football. 6. This is what some people feared when with the Pac-12 additions, even though this isn't even a conference game. Late night kickoff for Red Raider fans in the second week with Washington State. I know that may affect you and I when some cut eye, but you get the Pac-12 after dark, or Pac-2 after dark, you want to call it that. Everything else pretty, and then a 11 a.m. kick with North Texas. That one also highlights. But your reaction to the first 3 weeks? Anything standing out there?
Yeah, the 9 p.m. is, that it's 7 local in Pullman,
Right.
9 p.m. Central. That one, yeah, that one's going to sting a bit. But again, if you win, it'll all be good. If you lose, it'll just be miserable. That's just kind of what Wyoming was. It's what NC State was. For whatever reason, in Joey's first 2 years, the away non-conference game has eluded you from getting a win there, and would like to change that. So I don't care what time it is. If you come home with a win, man, sign me up. The 11 a.m. for North Texas, that one's a bit tricky, because that one is that actually squeezes that week a bit. People may go, just a few hours, but those hours are precious.
Sure.
In those weeks of preparation and everything. And the 11 a.m. non-conference home game is one that I don't really remember for, it's been a long time. Usually you get to pick, I think this one was picked up by FS1, I believe, but usually those are at the very minimum an afternoon, but more often than not, evening kicks. So that one was maybe stranger than the 9 o'clock Washington State game. I was kind of expecting a mid-afternoon, best case scenario, evening, worst case scenario, you got worst case. But the 11 a.m. one against North Texas. And there's a ton of Texas Tech folks on that North Texas team and staff, from obviously Eric Morris, Jordan Davis, Stephen Hamby, Brian Keegans is a name from years ago. Trey Cleveland. It just, there's a lot of flavor there, so they'll obviously be very motivated. But So anyway, that's my general thoughts there.
No question. Yeah, there's a lot to that Washington State game. That may be a swing game for at least for your early season, whether you win that or not, to kind of help bolster some of those expectations that are kind of flowing
Well,
in.
and Joey is he is, I think, 3-8 on the road. That's the
Hmm.
really the one of the knocks that, and I think he hammers himself about this. We got to figure out a way to be better on the road and all that.
Sure.
But that's really what would start it. Four of your first five are at home, but that's the one road game. And if you
Yep.
can kind of get that one, you feel like you get a little momentum going, and
Right.
then you gear up for that trip to Tucson, which will be a big one
Hmm.
against Arizona there, which they're in the conversation to be a conference title favorite. So, but yeah, I just and obviously you've got Clay McGuire and Josh Kelly, and there's a lot of Washington State flavor on your side of it too.
Yep. No doubt. Start with a football question from Twitter. Nate asks, "Will Texas Tech make the college football playoff within the next 5 years?"
Boy, you'd sure like to think that that's a big time frame, and I think that there's a chance that this is going to be expanded a bit. But here's the thing, if you're ever going to do that, if you ever are going to actually, there's a lot of chatter out of the SEC meetings. They're already
Mhm.
politicking. Shocker. 9-3 SEC team is going to be so much better than a 11-1 or 12-0 any other conference team.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, somebody's going to get hosed on that deal, and
Sure.
there's probably going to be some, a 9-3 Ole Miss or a 9-3 LSU, something that gets in over a 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 Big 12 or ACC team. We saw what happened to Florida State. Obviously this thing's getting expanded and maybe even expands a bit more with two more teams added into a 14-team
Yep.
conference. But boy, you'd sure like to think that your recruiting classes and uh, because I think what we're asking here is, are you going to contend for a Big 12 championship over the next 5 years? Well, you'd sure like to think so.
I would think so. Yeah.
And I think if you can answer that with a yes, then I think that means you can, you can envision the next step, because if you can contend for one, you can win it, and then that kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah.
So
Theoretically, the theoretically, and I know it doesn't work this way, the top two teams in the Big 12 will make it more often than not, at least according to the Vegas numbers out there. And if you're into that sort of thing, Vegas has Texas Tech with the fifth best odds in the Big 12 to make the playoff this season.
I was about to say, and that's this year,
That's
yeah.
this
So,
year. So that's where
but
you sit right now.
you're gonna have to you're gonna have to be a lot better on the road.
Yep.
Uh, and you're gonna have to have your quarterback healthy. You're gonna have to do some things that you haven't been doing to get to that point, because you're not gonna have a lot of margin for error. I mean, you look at your 5 road games this year, if you have a chance to be in Arlington this year, I would say, the Washington State game doesn't necessarily count, but it kind of does.
Hmm.
But I would say of your 5 road games, I mean, you have to be at minimum 3-2 in those five,
Yeah.
and probably have won all your home games. And even then, you're not necessarily
Well,
guaranteed. So that just shows you how much better you have to get, how much healthier your quarterback needs to be, and how good that, player needs to play, whoever's manning that position. Obviously, we think it'll be Barron this year. But so anyway, but yeah, it's a good question.
this one is from Ed, as we'll shift gears here. Level. Says, is the Tech basketball roster now complete? What is the probable starting lineup? So you could kind of take this from JT Toppin. And since the last time we talked, he is committed and signed with Texas Tech. So you can run with it from there.
It's not complete, no. Do I, so I'm taking that question literal. You've
Hmm.
got a couple more spots. Now, do I think that you're going to add a significant piece or another piece that is going to be a part of your rotation or a starter? I would say odds against that are unlikely.
Okay.
But I don't want to talk in absolutes or rule anything out. But as it stands, I tend to think that the team that your starters and your rotation and all that is largely in place, with the caveat that you never know. And my advice on this stuff, and people try to pin you down or say this is what's happening or this is what's good that we're gonna. I just think you have to be real careful there because there's so many things, you pivot so much.
Yeah.
It's like Akeem Olajuwon in the post. One thing changes another, and then this alters this or whatever, and then you kind of have a plan A, B, C, D, and sometimes you get to D, E, E, and F, on kind of what you're thinking. And because like the Toppin thing was a great example. You recruited him for the better part of 6 weeks to 2 months.
Mhm.
There were times when it looked not going to happen, or are highly unlikely. And then whether you're fending off UT or you're fending off the NBA, or you're just trying to make sure that he knows that if coming back to school, we have a great place for you here, young man.
Mhm.
But all the while, you're recruiting a variety of other folks, just in case, because you still have to have this piece. Could you have gone about it without this kind of piece? Yeah, but you would have been semi hand tied behind your back on a size, rebounding, some more scoring in the paint component, and it would have limited your versatility quite a bit, and you would have still been somewhat undersized as a team.
Mhm.
But and so you're having to recruit all these other folks, even though you really don't want to offer them. You don't really have a spot because NIL and playing time and a starting spot, all that, you don't want to offer that because you're really hoping that you get Mr. Toppin. And so anyway, just that's why I say it's just there's a variety of ways that these things can go, but you have a couple of spots. I expect them to attempt to fill. However, could you hold one? Sure. Is the final piece somebody that is not going to be a big NIL component or a big rotational component? Sure.
Mhm.
But I think largely your team is in place, yes, but it's not complete.
So for Ed, do you want to take a stab at a starting lineup or hold on?
Yeah, I think that the best way to do that is you look at who are like no-brainer starters.
Okay.
And I think Elijah Hawkins is that at the point
Point
guard.
guard.
I think where it gets real interesting is your two guard spot, your shooting guard.
Sure.
I think there's a variety of options there. I think that Darion Williams is a starter.
Hmm.
I think that JT Toppin is a starter.
Hmm.
I actually think Federico is a starter because he's really your one true five man.
Yeah.
That's it, and I don't know if you're wanting to start Toppin at the five and then kind of spin it down. I don't know. I mean, some games you may do that. I mean, but I would say four of those five that's a pretty safe bet.
Hmm.
And it's okay now. Is it Kerwin coming off the bench? Is it Chance McMillan coming off the bench? I think EY is obviously a rotational player. Christian Anderson Jr. is a rotational player. Where does Devin Cambridge fit into this? When will he be ready?
Hmm.
I think Kevin Overton is a clearly a rotational player. So I would say that four of those five, and then you either put McMillan, Walton, or Overton in that starting lineup with some punch off the bench. Because think about it, you now go from Lamar Washington and Robert Jennings and some of those folks being your sixth, seventh, and eighth options to now potentially, somebody like say Overton, or McMillan and Cambridge coming off the bench and EY coming off the bench.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant
I mean,
change.
you look at this roster and it's not a knock on what you did last year, or maybe it's a praise for Coach McCasland and the coaching job, but you feel pretty significantly more confident in what you have on paper, at least going into next season than where you were last year at this time. And mind you, you still finished tied for third in the Big 12 with that roster last year. So, but on paper, this roster looks quite a bit better than where you're sitting at this time last year.
Yeah, if healthy, you're
Yeah.
bigger, you have much more experience, and you're a lot more versatile. I think with what you want to do with lineups, you can play matchups, you can go big, you can go small, you can go up tempo. There's just a variety of different things that Grant can now do with this collection of players, and that's why JT Toppin was kind of the final piece because
Yeah.
I think he could play the five, he can play the four, he can help protect the rim. He's a plus defender. I mean, all the different things that come with his versatility, but then it allows you to handle someone like Cambridge a bit different because you have Toppin, and it allows you to handle D5 a bit differently because I mean D5 was playing the four last year, the bulk of the
Yeah.
whole season.
Yeah.
And as an undersized guy, and it
Big
caused some
time.
matchup problems now, but imagine if you put him at the three and then you've got Toppin and Federico out there. But you also now have D5 that could play the four and Toppin that could play the five, or Cambridge could come in and play the three or the four with D5 and Toppin out there. I mean, there's just and you're swimming in guards.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm not so certain that I think with all the hype that Toppin has gotten, and all deservedly so. I think he's an NBA guy. I think he's clearly a professional. I think that there's a chance if he comes here and things go well. I mean, you're looking at a potential lottery situation next year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may be a bit much of too much of an expectation, but I'd be willing to tell you that I bet Elijah Hawkins is going to be one of your most, if not the most important player on your team,
Yeah.
because take him. We could talk about the whole team. Take him away, and then what are you doing at point? You would have to lean on a freshman
Freshman.
and Christian Anderson Jr., or
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to play somebody that's theoretically out of position. Yeah, sure, Chance can handle some of that, and D5 could do some of it, and you can share it, but you're just not near as efficient, and I could see how that'd be kind of clunky, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, Hawkins may be while Toppin will get a lot of the headlines, and again, deservedly so, Hawkins may have been the most important addition, or certainly if Toppin is one, then Hawkins is 1A. And Overton, I think I haven't seen him enough to know if he could handle facilitating and being a playmaker and like doing some of the things that a point guard is asked. But you've got some options, but I just think it also speaks to how good Hawkins can be to get everybody involved. And those are just hard to find, which is why it was such a big deal to get him.
No doubt. Level, another question. We'll go to Twitter for this one. Roberto on Twitter says, love the show. Is there any update on the Thanksgiving weekend Tech basketball game and opponent? Planning to bring the family and hopefully for both basketball and football. So did A&M ever officially backed out of this, or?
I think that here's what I know. I know that Grant and Buzz Williams talked.
Mm-hmm.
I know that um, that there are some folks on the A&M campus that are not as on the same page as Trev Alberts is as far as NIL and some of the
Mm-hmm.
things go.
Yeah.
And I think that this was a situation where A&M felt like they needed to try to do it. But I don't know if you're, pen to paper and it's all in Sharpie with anything yet. But I just would, I'll just say this. At this point, as you're asking me right now as we talk, I'll be very surprised if A&M is playing here in basketball this Thanksgiving
Right.
Friday. Do I think that they can maybe kick the can down the road a little bit and reschedule? Sure. Which kind of defeats the purpose of what Texas Tech ultimately was trying to do.
Yeah.
I think that you are trying to give your fan base something on that Friday night, men's basketball wise. You've already got the arena booked, you've got the date booked. You just need an opponent. But it's at this late stage in the game, it's a bit tricky.
Mm-hmm.
there's just not anybody like A&M that's going to fill that void. I mean, short of, Texas or, I'm trying to think of who else could, I don't know. Maybe you could do something like I'm going to say this, and I don't have any knowledge of it, but it would be certainly interesting based on the Toppin news. But I mean, New Mexico would get a little dander up for your fan base, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
A UTEP, but that's not. This doesn't even come close to what what A&M would have done. And this is why I think a lot of these schools and Brett Yormark has kind of spearheaded a lot of these conversations. I think that a lot of these schools are going to start entertaining non-conference games against each other that
Hmm.
don't count against the standings.
Yeah.
Like if you end up not playing, Houston or an Oklahoma State or a Baylor, a TCU or whatever, like twice, and could you put something on paper in the non-conference and do like home and home that way and kind of beef up? So I wouldn't rule that out either.
Yeah, we've seen baseball do that
Oh yeah.
in recent
And
history.
football's doing it too
Yeah, yeah.
this
Baylor
year.
and Utah, right? And there's another one. Can't remember.
Well, Baylor and Utah are doing it. I think Arizona and Kansas State are doing
That's
it.
that's the one.
These are
Yeah,
these are all
sure.
pre-scheduled games that they just said just leave it. But
But
I think that
there was one in the ACC that happened, and that one, I mean, that was a year or two ago that Wake Forest and North Carolina, I think, played one, and it was a non-conference game
mhm.
against a conference opponent. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how scheduling works out, or that's what can be an attraction. Why not?
That's what Farmageddon will be in. Where are they playing that game in?
In
Oh, the
Ireland,
yeah, there you go. Okay, Ireland. Yeah, that's going to be a
that's a
non-conference
non-conference
game.
game. Okay.
Yep, because they're not. That was shockingly one of the rivalries that wasn't protected. But I think Kansas and Kansas State already had something protected, and
Yeah,
they are saying that they can only protect so many to keep
the
the
rotation.
formula working and all those things. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
So so yeah, so no game there. One other note on that, Roberto, is maybe Texas Tech goes after an opponent of one of those 8 teams that were in that NIL tournament that were, there's other teams that are searching for a game probably around that time. So maybe that's the route they go. I think Notre Dame, Creighton, some of those that were in the Vegas tournament that we're talking about. Um,
yeah, and it's for the winner of the tournament. It's you're playing for what is it, a mill or something?
I think I think each team gets 1 million to play in it, and then there's an additional 1 million that goes to the winner, I believe is how it goes.
I
So,
mean,
and that's NIL
well,
money.
that's substantial.
It's
Yeah,
attractive. Yeah.
yeah,
There's
absolutely, it is.
there's no question about that. Here's a
And you get
question.
to go play. You get to go play blackjack. I mean, not really, but you know
Well, I mean, maybe.
what I mean.
Let's scatter shoot. We got quite a few questions left, so we'll scatter shoot a little bit level to finish it
Golly,
off.
man, that's you're going Blackie Sherrod, Dallas Times Herald, which is way before your time.
Way before, yeah.
Kind of before in my time, but even predates me a bit. But yeah, that's what
Scatter shoot.
scatter shooting. Well, wondering whatever happened to, and then then there came the column or the
Yeah.
yeah
This was quite a bit before my time.
yeah.
Um, okay, this one was a holdover from Trevor from last week or last podcast that we didn't get to. It says, Level, which coach do you think will be on campus the longest? Grant McCasland, Tim Tadlock, or Joey McGuire?
My okay, so Tadlock is in the midst of a rough season, and that sport. I'm curious about a lot of things,
Hmm.
but that one is a sport that I'm just real fascinated by how it is going to be affected going forward. Anything from, is it kind of an afterthought for a lot of schools,
Mm-hmm.
or is it going to be fully funded and like, okay, now we can go from 11.7 scholarships to offering 25 to 30 or 40 unlimited, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of NIL activity as it relates to the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It appears that the SEC is a lot more involved in NIL as it relates to college baseball.
Yep.
Tim has done this for a long time, and at some point, he's kind of old school, not kinda, but is. It certainly seems to me, and so I wonder how much longer he wants to screw with this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me wondering aloud.
I think it's a fair question.
You adapt and thrive and try and all those things, but at the timing that you're asking me this, I think with. Grant is a very young, what I think like 47.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I'm going to tell you that because how was the question asked? Who will
So
be who
who
will
would
be
be on
there
campus the
longest?
longest? Yeah.
I'm going to say him.
Okay.
Joe, my concern with Joey is that he's got more energy than any 10 people that you'll ever meet or be around. And
No
and
doubt.
who he is on a Tuesday morning is the same how he is on a Saturday afternoon in the fall.
Yep.
I just wonder with how much the pace that he goes at, I just wonder if it's sustainable. I don't know if any human can sustain this pace,
Yeah.
5 to 10 years down the road. I hope so, but
I do too.
he amazes me because he is out and about, and I mean it's recruiting. It's what keeps him going. And but I just wonder how sustainable like his pace is for everything that he is doing, because there's nobody in college athletics that's busier than a college football coach these days.
Mm-hmm.
Recruiting literally never stops, not
Mm-hmm.
just from the outside in, but with your own team. The money raising aspect of it never stops. Trying to figure out, there's so many components that we're not even there yet on the revenue sharing component, which may involve, okay, I got this pool of money. Now it's up to me and my staff to decide how much the quarterback gets versus how much the left tackle gets versus how much the starting corner gets versus how much a backup gets. Do we have to declare a starter and a backup? That's a whole new layer that could be coming down the pike for that job.
Yeah.
But it's just managing the rules that change dramatically. And then you may be going to take away walk-ons from them potentially. You've added a microphone into their helmet or an
Yep.
earpiece into their helmet. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's wild to me. So anyway,
Yeah.
so
Lots.
that's why I would say that the college football coach in general has I'm going to say a shorter shelf life than most.
Yeah.
And and and
I
Joey
think
pushes the envelope. That's why we all love him so much and why everybody chooses to buy in, because he literally is just a dang machine,
yeah.
But I think Grant is got some good balance. I think that he's at one of his ideal spots and is well supported, and I think he could see a lengthy tenure here.
Yeah. I hope. I mean, I think most Red Raider fans hope the answer to that question is a long time for all three of them. But
Oh, sure, yeah, but
yeah, I
again,
think
that
that's probably. I mean, you went with the
it,
youngest guy, and
it would be a cop out for me to go, hey man, they're all here at the end. But you gotta,
no,
that's just those are my thought processes
nope.
in it. Yeah.
I think that's very fair. Here's another one, football wise. This one's from Jason. How long till we get injury reports in college football like they have in the
See,
NFL?
another thing that Coach McGuire and his peers may have to deal with. I saw Steve Sarkisian say recently, like, hey man, make us do this, and if we don't do it right, fine us like they do in the NFL.
Hmm.
I think Joey is pushed for this. Here's my question: who polices it, and who's in charge of deciding whether this is this is how we're going to go about it. The NCAA has had their legs cut out from under them in recent. Is this like a could it be a Big 12 only type deal? Like, hey, your mark is going to say this is what we're doing for league games only, and this is how we're going to operate, and then who polices it? Because I mean, gamesmanship all the time. Some coaches are more transparent than others as it relates to injuries and trying to protect their own interests and all those things. So I don't know if I'm there yet on that this would be normal.
Yeah,
But the closer we get to professional sports, which were there, and the NFL, which
sure.
were, that's why a lot of folks are saying, hey, we're doing all this other stuff. Why not this?
Yeah. And we have heard Coach McGuire talk about it publicly that
He would prefer it.
yeah, he wants it like
Yeah.
because then he doesn't have to answer questions all week long about injury. It's just 2 hours or 3 hours before the game or whenever they put these out. That's when you get the injury reports, and that's
And
how it
then
goes. So,
we'll have to all learn what the difference between doubtful and questionable and probable
probable,
and out and all,
right? Oh
you
yeah,
get into all those things. So
yeah. All the NFL jargon.
that's right. That's right.
So
And like they keep in mind the NFL, they have those practice reports and they
yes,
declare like pretty much daily,
yeah, they do.
and you have to, man, if you had a dentist appointment, you have to say did not practice. I mean, it's yeah,
Sure.
it's very transparent and it's all gambling related and trying to, that's just kind of how it goes.
Mark asks this will probably be our last one. Hey, fellas, with the settlement of the lawsuit, I believe this is true, but the universities can't raise fees and tuition on students to recoup the cost being paid to athletes, correct? Is that a separate budget?
Yeah, well, I guess my question would be, how, I mean, let's be honest, Woodman, how do you know if I'm gonna raise, how do you know
What the reasoning is?
what fees
Right.
or tuition? I mean, I think that because you're naive if you don't think that institutions really have been, and I think more are going to do this, where they start supplementing their athletic departments. Texas Tech has been one of those that hasn't really done any of that. I think they're about to start. I think it was already kind of pre-planned with a lot of the extra costs and limited TV revenue that you're used to compared to your counterparts and all those things. But this revenue sharing thing adds a different component to it. But I don't think you can tell an institution what they can and can't do with their money. University of Houston, I mean, they've been tapping into. I mean, there were years. Remember when Bryles and Baylor were rolling in Waco,
Yeah.
and there was chatter about whenever your job would come open, and there would be the chatter about Bryles being a possibility, and you would, Baylor is a private institution, so they don't have to declare a lot of these numbers, but you would get into conversations and hear from people that I absolutely trusted, dude, we can't come close to paying our coach or the staff what they're making in Waco right now across the board.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow. And it's because the institution of Baylor was giving their athletic department or funding somewhere between like 10 or $15 million annually. And that's a significant chunk. And if you don't think, I mean, so,
And
and
their
I
institution charges double in their
well, that
all that.
too, that
What?
too. But um, yeah, I do think that that the institution, the Texas Tech system, however you want to phrase that, is going to start supplementing your athletic department. And I think there's a lot of regents that are ultimately going to call that shot that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly support it
Mhm.
because the two folks that are most responsible for that South End expansion Dusty Womble and Cody Campbell are on the Board of Regents.
Right.
So
There you go.
if you're sitting on a mountain of cash, then because I think most institutions really did well during COVID with the online, they got to basically reap the same financial benefits, but didn't have near the cost.
Operating costs, yeah.
Yes. And so I think it really, so I don't know a lot of those specific numbers, but I know that Texas Tech as an institution or the system is in great financial shape with enrollment growing and all those things. And so I think, and you don't have the luxury of the Puff Fund like UT and A&M do. Now you're tapping into this other fund that they've kind of tried to pacify you, and North Texas and Texas State and Houston and Texas Tech is all kind of involved there. So some of those monies could be used, but yeah, I don't know how you dig in and prove what what monies, you could just add some fee or raise tuition. Yeah. And how are you going to prove that that's
where it's going?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to do. All right, Level.
But I do expect when some of this becomes public, not just at Texas Tech, but there's going to be some chemistry professor on some campus that leads a rally and gets real frustrated about,
for sure,
how monies are being used, or when you can't, professors aren't getting a raise. I mean, that's not just a local, that's a nationwide
right
issue. Google the movie The Program. Back in the day, it was like a 91, 92, 93 time frame, and James Caan, RIP, he was the coach in that deal, and one of his players got in trouble, and he said at one of these academic hearings to the academician at the deal, kind of ruling on with an iron fist, he was like, 80,000 people don't show up for a chemistry experiment, man. And it's the truth.
It's a great line.
The truth. Yeah, it's the truth. So anyway, enjoyed that one. That one flew by. Thank you to the folks at Cantex Roofing. Woodman will get back in a regular rotation, maybe a bit as we get through the summer months. But yeah, man, enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. You've been tuned in to the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.